County Commissioners meeting for May 18th, and I'd like to begin by asking Commissioner Lance Simpson if he would do our invocation. I'm sorry, Manager, I didn't see that you had.
That's all right, I'm seated.
Okay.
Lord, thank you for the opportunity to come together this evening to represent the citizens of this county. Please grant us the wisdom and patience to serve the citizens according to their needs. And with the Memorial Day observance approaching, we ask that you continue to watch over and protect the military members that serve so faithfully each and every day. We thank them for their service. Heavenly Father, we thank you for hearing our prayer and thank you for the blessings you have bestowed upon us each and every day. Amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we want to identify some of our employee recognition for years of service. Dale Louder with Human Services with 10 years of service. Also with 10 years of service, Thomas Lucina with the Sheriff's Department. And in April, we had retirements. Richard Watkins in Growth Management with 20 years. Daniel Klein with the Sheriff's Office, 6 years. And James Knox with the Sheriff's Office for 5 years. It's probably one of the most enjoyable parts to identify those that have received recognition. And Deputy Philman, if you'd step up, I'd like to introduce you to our community. We appreciate your service. I met the Deputy Philman at the Safe Kids Award. He was out working with them the other day. And on March 26, 2015, Jonathan was awarded the North Carolina Child Passenger Safety Advocate of the Year in Raleigh. This is a state award and a significant accomplishment. It was presented by the North Carolina Child Passenger Safety Training Program and the North Carolina Governor's Highway Safety Program. Mr. Philman has been involved in the county, involved in traffic safety enforcement in Union County for over 10 years. Before becoming the Union County Sheriff's Office, he served as a traffic officer in the town of Wingate. In December, he was presented with the award. During his work in public safety departments in the county, he helped reestablish Union County Safe Kids, where I had the opportunity to meet him the other morning. Also a board member for that committee. Jonathan most recently helped establish the Child Passenger Seat Diversion Program with the District Attorney's Office, which offers drivers charged with child passenger seatbelt violation the option of being educated on how to properly restrain their kids. Sir, we appreciate what you do every day and your exemplary service to our county and especially in protection of our children. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to ask Stephanie Harms to come up. And I was kidding Miss Harms just a minute ago because she was back there holding Deputy Philman's child. Stephanie Harms has been employed at the Union County Sheriff's Office for 12 and a half years and excelled in every position she's held. She's worked in positions as a detention officer, animal services, and presently a school resource officer. In July 2013, she was transferred to a present school as resource officer at Parkwood Middle School. And over the past 2 years, she has proven to be invaluable at Parkwood school community, and due to her hard work and dedication, she was nominated and won the award for 2015 SRO of the Year for Union County Public Schools. Thank you very much for what you do. And I'd like to say we've got other deputies here, and we appreciate what they do on a continuous basis to support our county. Next, we would like to open a public hearing regarding the proposed FY 2016 operating and capital budget for county services. So we'll open that, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Koto.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. This presentation will look very familiar to you since you probably saw it 2 hours ago. However, for the public's consumption and information, we thought it was important to give just a brief overview of those who may not have been following our 8 work sessions on the budget prior to taking any public comment as it relates to the budget. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Yates, our Director of Administrative Services and our CFO.
Good evening, Commission. As Cindy mentioned, I apologize, I had a little bit of technical difficulty. As Cindy mentioned, this is the presentation we provided earlier in the work session concerning the budget. Tonight, what you have in front of you is a public hearing concerning the county operations budget as well as the VFD and EMS funding. And in our earlier process, we kind of updated where we were, and I'll kind of go through these again now. A quick review of the manager's proposed budget, including the proposed tax rates, the total budget overview, as well as the general fund model, the distribution of the ad valorem tax summary, our water and sewer fund model, and our VFD funding, and then kind of talk about a little bit about the budget calendar. If you remember back last year, we started a new process we refer to as our bifurcated budget process. And in that process, what we do is we split out the school funding for a separate discussion, given its volume and its size, from the county's operating. So you can see on the blue, or on my left and your left as you look at the screen, is where we are in the county's budget process. The manager delivered her budget on the 4th. We've had a work session then on the 4th as well as tonight. And then tonight we're holding our public hearing on that process. So this kind of really is the wrap up to the county side discussion. And we received, as you can see on the right side, the superintendent's, actually the Board of Education's proposed budget on Friday. And we're working through the evaluation of that and analysis. And in fact, on tonight's agenda, we'll give you a quick cursory review of that as we do more detailed analysis of that. The proposed tax rates that you have in front of you, again, excluding the schools rate at this point because we're not done with that process, is a total of a 31.93. That's 28.82 in local county operations, and then about 3.11 for countywide fire and EMS. And that breaks out for the countywide fire and EMS about 2.6 cents for EMS and about half a penny for the VFDs. And that's in addition to, as we'll see in just a couple minutes, in addition to the funding they get from their fire fees and their localized fire taxes. Where does the funding come from through the entire gross budget? Largely from ad valorem, as you can see on this graph. About 53% comes through ad valorem taxes. And in this table, about $186.6 million, that includes the funding for VFDs that are taken at the localized tax level, as well as the schools tax and the county-wide taxes. Next, you see we have our largest category being the enterprise charges for services, and that's your water, sewer, utility. Those enterprise charges for services are essentially fees paid by the user for a specific purpose, and those generally offset the other side of the equation as far as cost. You have non-enterprise charges for services, and those are in our health and human services and our planning department and so forth. And then you can see a number of other things. Sales tax, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. But sales tax is about $35.4 million, and that's a breakdown between the funding for schools debt as well as a sales tax allocation to the VFDs. Where does it go? This is based on our executive departments, our service areas. 44% of the total budget goes to schools. That's just under 153.2 million. That includes debt service, the operations or the current expense funding, the capital funding, and then also a couple $100,000 of maintenance money that is spent on the central admin facility down the street. That's still our building, and we pay to clean it as well as maintain it. The sheriff's office is about 8%, almost $30 million. Your second largest department is the public works, and that's your utilities, facilities, the our solid waste funds, those other things, and then human services is about $43.3 million. And then you see there's a number of other services, including administrative services, Board of Elections, our community partners, which includes SPCC, the funding we provide for economic development and those other areas, our community services, which includes libraries, soil and water conservation, the Ag Center, and so forth. Emergency services is about $22.3 million. That's your 911 center, the funding for the VFDs, your EMS funding, and so forth. So, and then the other option, or the other item on this that I'll point out real quick that's fairly significant is the General County Administration. That includes a number of smaller departments: Human Resources, Tax Collection, the Board of County Commissioners, the Manager's Office, the Legal Department. Those general county services are behind-the-scenes services that don't really have a home as far as a service area. Probably a better way to look at it is kind of see where the money goes as far as how we spend it. Our biggest chunk comes in grants, subsidies, and contracts, and that's the reason why that is so high is because the way that we fund EMS, the way that we fund schools, the way that we fund VFDs, SPCC, and those other groups. Normally what you would see in this, and we talked about this a little earlier, normally what you would see is our employee compensation and benefits would be a bigger chunk. But because we contract a lot of services, the contracts for services is our biggest area. The next big chunk of that is going to be debt service, and that's about $53.3 million. Interfund transfers and so forth, capital outlay. Our total cost for employees and employee benefits countywide is about 21% of our total budget. The FTE summary, the other way to look at it is where are your people, because those are normally your biggest cost. Well, with where we contract out, your biggest area that you have actual employees in is human services. And then we'll look in just a second, but that's largely funded through state and federal dollars. Your sheriff's office and your public works, those are your biggest areas. And then you see community services and so forth. So you can see we have just around 1,000 employees in total to provide those services and those services across the county. The general fund projection, I apologize for everybody looking in the audience. This will be on our website tomorrow, so you can download a version of it, and it's also in our proposed budget book. This is our general fund financial projection, and the reason we do this is one of the board's priorities, in fact, probably one of the highest priorities in all that we do, is fiscal sustainability. So what we're presenting to you is a budget that is sustainable for county services going forward. And we look out into the future and we project based on what we know historically, what we expect growth to be in all those areas, to determine if the tax rate we're asking you to set tonight is sufficient, or that we're asking you to tentatively approve is sufficient, or if it's going to need to change. And based on our analysis, we feel like that, at least for the next 5-year projection window, that the county would be in good shape at the 28.82. Now recognize that the 311 for EMS and VFDs may change based on your EMS contract and the working group around VFDs. But as far as county services, which include the sheriff, and the general government services, we feel like that this is a good budget from that perspective, and this shows it's sustainable. And if you look across that bottom where it says over under percentage, as long as that percentage is not plus or minus more than 3%, we feel like it's a manageable budget going forward, and that's kind of our sensitivity to error for our forecast. Distribution of ad valorem tax, because we've broken out EMS and we've broken out schools and broken out VFDs, we think it's appropriate then to also show you kind of where all of our service areas in the general fund kind of break out as far as a tax allocation. And I'll just draw your attention to a couple of the larger ones. Community services is around 3.2 cents of the ad valorem tax. Emergency service is 2.4, and that would include your 911 center, fire marshal's office, and those areas. Your human services is about 7.8 cents. And I want to point out for them that more than half of their budget comes through intergovernmental revenue, meaning state and federal revenue, and from fees for services from their clients. So although they are 7.8 cents of the tax rate, the majority of their budget comes through other sources and not the tax rate. I'll point out also that the Register of Deeds, this is the first year, at least since we've been doing this analysis over the last couple of years, that the Register of Deeds is right at break even. So that's a positive from the perspective of the service level that she provides, about $26,000 or almost $27,000 of general fund support. The Sheriff's Office is about 10.88 cents, which is by far your largest department, which matches up with the Commission's priority concerning expenditures on public safety. And then UCPS debt service is about 3.4 cents. And that includes, if you look into the local option sales tax column, that the schools get full credit for all the sales tax received within the county that goes to the general fund. That obviously excludes the amount that's allocated to the tax districts for VFDs. And they also get the $2.1 million under intergovernmental revenue is lottery proceeds from the state. So that goes to offset that debt payment of about $44 million. And then the difference is funded then through the tax rate of about right around 7.7 million. The water and sewer fund, remember last year you approved a 3-year rate increase of 6.5%. This is the second year of that in 2016. In 2017, we'll finish that out, and then we'll reforecast or recast the numbers for the future. The biggest driver really is if you were to follow the capital outlay and the debt service, the interfund transfer and the debt service line across, or the PAYGO capital, across, what you would see is the biggest driver in the water and sewer fund is really their capital program and their construction, not necessarily their operating. And in fact, if you go all the way out through 2020 and 2021, what you would see is probably just under half of their total budget is going to be committed to debt service to fund the significant water resource projects that they have going on. So it's not really the operations that are driving those rate increases over the years. What we're seeing is that capital program, which has been approved as part of the master plan, is really driving that process. The VFDs, what you see in front of you is the allocation based on the direction of the board at their April 20th meeting to freeze, and that included a freeze on capital and capital reserves and elimination of those one-time expenses. In so doing, we adjusted the localized taxes for the VFDs in those tax districts, including adjusting their sales tax allocations. And we also adjusted the fire fees where possible, and you saw a couple creep below $100 this year based on that. Now I do expect, based on the working group, that by 2017's budget process, that this will change in some form or fashion, because we are holding them at the 2015 level, and I don't think it's realistic to hold them at 2015 indefinitely. But while that work is done by the group, I think that it's appropriate to wait until that group finishes. And what you'll see is under the countywide additional subsidy as well as the station subsidy, the county, because we eliminated some of that one-time capital funding, was able to reduce the amount of funding to the VFDs from the county by about $300,000 or $400,000. So that was a positive, helped us keep that 311 rate low as we go into the future. You see a couple of the tax districts had slight increases, and that's purely a result of the reval and the lost revenue within those tax districts being able to cover their costs. So kind of where we are in our budget process. Tonight we're having our public hearing. The board can tentatively approve the 2016 operating and capital budget. During the week of the 25th, we're hoping to have joint meeting with the Board of Education. I think you'll be talking about that a little bit later. May 29th, the county manager will provide the UCPS addendum to the county manager's proposed budget, which is, we have a statutory deadline of June 1st to deliver to you a complete budget. On June 1st, you'll have the public hearing concerning the UCPS budget. On the 15th, you'll have your statutorily required hearing, and then June 30 is the latest possible date that the board can adopt a budget, whether it be a continuation budget or it be the full budget. So with that, I'll open it up and give it back to you, Commissioner.
Okay. At this time, we had some people sign up to speak during our public hearing, and had a little different situation where we had some individuals that signed up to speak on the budget, and they signed up on the informal comments. And I assume, since you can't speak on a public hearing subject, I assume you wanted to be on the public hearing to allow you to speak on the subject. Right. Correct, Rick? Okay. All right, we'll start off with Miss Dawn Gardner, Mayor of Waxhaw. Would you come and share with us, please, ma'am?
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are folks doing tonight? A couple of things that I wanted to talk with you about tonight. First we ended the presentation with, of course, the fire tax districts, and if you all haven't received a letter from my board at this point this afternoon, then you will be receiving one shortly. And the main concern that we have in Waxhaw about the funding of the Waxhaw Volunteer Fire Department is that the Waxhaw Department has always been very frugal and very careful in how we manage our budget. But as you all know, we are where the center of growth is right now. And the challenge that we're facing right now is that just holding the line on funding is going to keep us from being able to keep up with the increasing call volume and the need for adding paid personnel to cover the night shift and so forth to manage the safety of our community as we continue to grow as we're doing. I understand completely the challenges that you all are faced with in making fair budget decisions for everybody, but I hope that you will consider the fact that while some of the other departments may have no growth or less growth, Waxhaw is in a position where we are growing very rapidly, and we need the funding for the fire department to continue to reflect that. But the other thing I wanted to talk with you all about, a couple of weeks back, the Waxhaw Board of Commissioners did pass a resolution related to working with you on expanding library services in the town of Waxhaw. You all may know a little bit about the history of the library in Waxhaw, and that is that back in the 1930s, some of the good folks of Waxhaw decided that we needed library services or some means for people in our community to be able to better themselves through reading and books. And at the time, one of the storefront owners on Main Street very generously opened up a portion of their storefront to accommodate a couple of bookshelves, and the people of the community brought in some books, and that's how we got our library started. And the Library of Waxhaw is a precious commodity to us, and a very, very well-used one. I'm sure that you all have seen the numbers over the past couple of years from the library board of the level of traffic that the Waxhaw Library receives as opposed to some of the other facilities throughout the county. And yet we are the smallest library facility in the system, and continues to be the smallest library in the system at this time. Back in 2010, I believe it was, we began a conversation with this board. I don't think any of you gentlemen were presently sitting on that board, but we started a conversation, and we made some progress, but we didn't actually accomplish the goal of expanding library services. And prior to that, I understand that Weddington had a good conversation with you all back in 2005 or 2006, something like that. But we still have not gotten any further library services into Western Union County to serve the growing population there. So what I'd like to propose, and I know that the numbers for upcoming budgets have been as much as 12 to 14 million in capital that was being proposed for a Waxhaw library, and then that's kind of gone by the wayside. But what I'd like to propose is, maybe taking the approach that seems to be working very well for you on a couple of other issues, and putting together a group of people, a task force, like you did with the EMS contract, and like you're doing presently with the fire issue. And get some folks from Waxhaw, some folks from the library system, some folks from your board, perhaps, and come up with a plan for expanding library services in Waxhaw and in Western Union County in the very near future, but in a manner that is feasible to be funded, understanding the restraints both on the county and the city of Waxhaw's funding abilities. So just for your consideration, I wanted to put that out there, and if any of you don't have a copy of the resolution that the Waxhaw Board passed a few weeks ago, I'll be happy to make sure that you get a copy of that as well. Okay?
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it. Frank, Capella, I assume since you want to speak on the budget?
Yes.
Good.
I might go a little over, but I'll try.
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm speaking to you tonight as a taxpayer, business owner, and a parent of a child that attends Union County Public Schools. I'd like to speak about the budget process and the relationship between our Board of Education and our county commissioners. There are a few points that I'd like to make. First, regarding the lawsuit, the Union County Board of Education filed a request for a rehearing last week. If there is one thing, just one thing, that's an impediment to a better relationship between two entities, it's lawyers and ongoing threats of legal action. Thankfully, the court quickly rejected that rehearing this past Friday. For the life of me, I cannot understand why our Board of Education didn't swiftly and emphatically move on from this case so both boards could effectively turn the page and get a deal done. The rehearing action was silly, and everyone knows it. What's not silly? Taxpayers continuing to foot the bill as legal costs spiral into the millions. Precious tax dollars that could have been given to teachers and teachers' assistants. It's not a laughing matter, and our residents should be outraged. Secondly, the Board of Education made its formal funding request for $548 million, over $500 million in requests, which may include a bond or bonds to finance. It is my hope that both boards will approach this request first and foremost with fiscal responsibility. This is pure common sense. Now, without getting into the weeds, I have 5 questions for our county commissioners. First, what's the cost of a $548 million request to the taxpayers here in Union County? Remember, our taxes just went up 15% last year to help fund our schools, and we just had a negative revaluation. Second, what are the ramifications of this request as it relates to our county credit rating? Third, can someone speak to the county's ability to attract and recruit mid or large cap businesses should our tax rate surpass neighboring counties? Fourth, in regard to county growth, please clarify if residential permits are up or down. And fifth, when was the last time both boards sat down and met with one another? How in the world can a deal ever get done when all the main players can't even be in the same room together, regardless of what a working group is doing? In closing, we need to live within our means. No realistic budget negotiation starts out too big to fail. Also, an education funding strategy should never be dictated by an attorney, ever. This board and our BOE have a lot of work to do. Let's try and get a deal done without another lawsuit and without sending Union County over a cliff. Let's responsibly fund our schools. Thank you.
Rick Parker.
Good evening. I'm here on behalf of Safer Communities Ministries, and just correct time. Okay.
Good to go.
Al was supposed to be here. Al had a previous engagement and he couldn't come, so I've been asked to step in, and so it's an honor to stand here before you and talk to you tonight and try to give you a little brief overview of what's going to be happening. As you know, that we have asked the board for the county for an increase in our budget, some $23,000. And with this $23,000, of course, I can't go into all the details because I don't have enough time of what we do at Safer Communities. But we are an entity in the jail, and we provide direction for inmates, and we provide life skills for the inmates. And once they come out, we have this what they call SCREEN, Second Reentry Network, and it's the administrator's job, which is the executive director's job, to oversee inmates as they come out and try to put them into society to where they can be a taxpayer rather than someone who's taking from the tax system. So with that being said, having to over the past few years, we've had our budget has been decreased. In 2009, it substantially decreased. But if you look, or excuse me, in 2010, but in 2009, if you look back at the increase we got then, what we're asking for is really not a whole lot of difference. So I would just ask you, if you would please, to consider that when it comes time to look at our part of the budget, because for 17 years we've been teaching life skills in these jails, and what we're trying to teach these people to do is to be able to re-enter into society, to write a resume, to balance a checkbook, to take responsibility for their actions, or whatever. So, and then we also partner with ARM, which is our addiction recovery ministry. That's headed up by John Hurley, and we come to the Union County here by the library at the First Presbyterian Church every Tuesday night at 8 o'clock. So what this enables us to do is to be able to help people once they come out of jail to transition from being in jail to being out in society. So as I said, ex-offenders face many difficulties just trying to transition back into, and if you don't mind, I would like for Wesley to come. He's a product of the screen, and just very short. We only have 30-some seconds, so if you could just kind of give a.
Rick, I've actually got Keziah, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
He's got the full time. He's another speaker.
Yeah. But anyway, so we have accountability meetings, on Tuesday nights. And so it's a contract with the county. We can understand that. So we want to continue on with the county with the contract, and we would like to consider increasing the budget by the $23,000, because if we can keep one person, just one person out of the jail from re-entering the jail system, and we've tracked this over the years, that our recidivism rate is only like 19%. So, which is statewide is like 50 to 55% of the recidivism rate. So if we can keep one person out of jail per year, it's approximately $26,000 tax savings to the county. So I would just ask you to consider, if you would please, raising the contract with Safer Communities Administration.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, Wes?
Yeah, I'm Wes Keziah. I've been in the courthouse a lot, never on the good side of things. Safer Communities, the Life Skills Program, I went through the program. I actually asked to stay in jail an extra 7 days just so I could finish the program, because I've never finished anything to be proud of. And the class has taught me a lot. Do I think it'll work for everybody? Absolutely not. However, if you're looking for a better way of life, when I went in, I was an addict, heroin addict, a liar and a thief, and I was just a cruel human. They taught me a new way to live. Now I'm a supervisor at my job. I got my own crew. I stayed on probation now for the longest I've ever been on probation without failure. And it's kind of a discipleship. Now the guys that get out of the program, I get to help them find jobs and get to help them promote them into being better people for society, because I believe we could drop some of the finances for the jailhouse if we would drop having so many people go back and forth, back and forth. And that's what the class teaches you, is recidivism. You don't have to keep going back. They teach you that you're accepted no matter what you've done, no matter the circumstances that you brought upon yourself, and they teach us to be responsible for our actions. And I believe that the class, if taken seriously, we can grow so much more than just the class. The ARM ministry, the addiction recovery ministry that we go to on Tuesday night, those guys are just a safety net, and you can't fail when people will actually reach out and help you no matter what your background is. Half of the people don't even know what my background is over there, and they don't care because they're looking for my future and not towards my past. And I just believe the program it's amazing, and there's just so much more. If we could get more than 12 guys in there at a time, why not try to reach out to the whole jail instead of just trying to keep 12 people at a time from going back? I believe the program is at least 90% effective, but it's 100% effective for the people who are truly wanting to change. And it's hard to change when you don't have people that'll back you up, and it's hard to get a good job when you don't have anybody that has any faith in you. But this group has showed me that it's not ever over when you have a support system, when you have a way to get around things, not like loopholes, but people that'll give you a chance because they know that you're trying to change. And people really want to change. They just need another route. And some people don't get that route or the options to go a different way. They have to keep falling back and just falling back to crime and lifestyles that they're used to, because it's really hard to get opportunities and options when people just look down on you for your background. And I really appreciate y'all listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. Okay, I'd like to close the public hearing.
Mr. Holmes, I think my comments would be more appropriate for the budget, for the special hearing than public comments. Is that all right?
That's fine, Eric, come on.
Thank you. My name is Eric Anderson from WAC. I'm from Weddington. First off, I'd like to thank this board for the resolution they made this last time I was here in front of you, where you asked Weddington to just hold off until 2016 when you guys, everybody here can work out how we're going to do fire service for the entire county. Obviously, the Weddington Town Council did not heed your request. Because of the actions of our mayor, the county is going to be in the hole for about $3 million in lost fire equipment. And from what I can gather from attending the Weddington Town Council meetings, now they want to sell a perfectly good, just renovated building to the county for between $500,000 and $1.5 million. They haven't decided yet. The building is paid for. It is, to me, the height of insanity to ask the county to have to borrow money to pay for a building that had been leased out for $1 a year to a fire department. There's no reason to borrow the money. This is going to be a case, in my mind, where the rich, which is Weddington, the western part of the county, are going to tax the poor to help support them. Except it doesn't give the residents of Weddington any benefit. That money that could be used, that the Weddington Town Council is proposing to ask Wesley Chapel Fire Department to borrow, is going to be taken away from the fire departments in the eastern part of the county, which desperately need it. That can repair a lot of engines, can give firefighters a lot of training, and it doesn't do anybody any good. So I'd ask that the county commissioners request from the Weddington Town Council again to lease the building for a year for $1, just like they leased it to Providence Volunteer Fire Department, until July of 2016, when a county-wide fire service can be worked out. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Rose, yours is a budget issue as well,
Well,
or funding?
It's basically the same comment that Eric Anderson made.
I think,
he covered everything I wanted to cover.
okay, all right, thank you. Now that completes our public hearing, and move to close the public hearing. And next we have informal comments, and all of our informal comments were associated with the public hearing, so we heard everyone that signed up, so we have no one else to speak. Next, we have addition, deletion, and adoption of the agenda. Vice Chair Rushing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to add an item to the agenda. I wasn't on the board when the funding dispute with the Board of Education and the county entered in litigation last time. I would like to hear from the county attorney regarding this year's BOE budget request received last Friday. I propose that we add this item 8A, and immediately following the initial discussion of the BOE fiscal year 2016 budget request.
Okay. Commissioner Rushing, I support your item on the agenda. We'll make it 8A. And I'd like to add another item to the agenda, 8B. This item would be to request the Board of Education to meet in joint session with the Board of Commissioners during the week of May 25th to present their 2015-16 budget. And I'd like to make that 8B. Is there any additional? I think we need to have an item 8C also that will discuss, tentative approval of the proposed county portion of the budget. Any discussion?
Motion to adopt the agenda as amended.
Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All righty. Next, and that item will be 8C. Next, we will have the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent.
Okay, motion to approve. Any discussion? All in favor of the consent agenda?
Aye.
Okay. Next, we have for old business, the Union County Unified Development Ordinance text changes. Ms. Manager, if you will,
Yes, Chairman and Commissioners, at your May 4th meeting, you conducted a public hearing on the text amendments to your UDO. This evening, the agenda item is requesting that you take action as it relates to that public hearing. Brian Matthews, the Executive Director with Growth Management, is here this evening. If you would like for him to go over what those text amendments are, he did provide you with a presentation at your May 4th meeting.
does anyone need to hear from Mr. Matthews? I think we've had several presentations on that. Then I move that we adopt the Unified Development Ordinance text changes and adopt applicable consistency statement. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All righty. Next, in new business, we have the presentation of the Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Plan. Ms. Manager?
Ms. Smith, are you making the presentation this evening? Marty Smith, our Executive Director over Community Services, for about another month.
Uh-huh. And I am not making the presentation
You are
because
not.
our consultants are here, and we're going to have them make a presentation to you because you heard from me probably quite enough on this subject. But it is our pleasure to bring this completed plan to you for your consideration and adoption tonight. And I'd like to introduce our consulting firm that's worked with us to develop this excellent plan. This is Land Design. And so we have with us Meg Neeland, who's going to actually present to you a brief presentation of the plan, and with her is Beth Poovey.
Marty, the another month issue is because you're going to take advantage of retirement.
Yes,
and we'll have opportunity to talk again, but do wish you the best.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for this opportunity to present this plan. Let me get back into where we need to be. Okay, so we have spent several months working with staff, the steering committee, and many members of the community developing this plan. And so tonight, this presentation is to briefly take you through the contents of it, and mainly the highlights and the kinds of things that were brought to the surface as really important priorities for the county. We went through this process, which essentially has 4 parts to it. The first part being the community involvement process that took place throughout the entire process to really engage citizens and get quite a bit of input that informed this plan. The second and third parts were the inventory and analysis, which led to the development of the plan itself and all of the details within it, including a conceptual plan and recommendations and implementation strategies. And then, of course, the documentation of it in the final plan, which I think you all have seen draft copies of. What's important to note about this process is that when we go about identifying the needs for the county, there's so many different things that we do in the way of activities to obtain information, receive input that informs the development of the plan to really understand what's important to Union County, what's valued, and what really needs to be brought forward as things to emphasize going forward for the Parks and Recreation system. Those kinds of things are qualitative input. We get that through stakeholder interviews. We had over 50 people participating and sharing information about the county that was really critical to the process. and community workshops, community meetings. We had 3 throughout the process. And we augment those with some quantitative data, comparison to national standards and what's happening in some precedent communities that, that Union County is similar to. We also conducted a couple of surveys, one that was more informal and qualitative, and one that was based on a random sample of your population, and combined we had about 3,000 people, or 3,000 responses. So that supplementing what we learned at the community meetings was extremely helpful and informative. And then we also rely on our observations throughout the process, the field reconnaissance that we conduct, looking at demographics and trends where Union County is going in the future and what that suggests as future needs, and then a lot of mapping of your assets to see what your system currently has and what opportunities that presents. So a lot of input into this process before we embark on a plan, but as we began this process and continued through it, there was a vision for building a stronger community by providing high quality, healthy, and memorable experiences through activities that are exciting, educational, and family friendly to all citizens. So that's quite a bit, but what we're really getting at there are the goals that served as our guideposts throughout the process. These 6 goals really informed the process. So as we thought about different ideas through the process with the community and got feedback, these were the kinds of things that we were comparing it to understand whether or not the measures that Union County could take in the future, how well they might achieve these goals that have been set forth. The system that has been depicted here in this system map conceptually illustrates a wide range of park types throughout the county, linked by a series of trails, and greenways, of course, would be part of that. And what you're seeing here is the idea of a cohesive system that, working in partnership with municipalities and various organizations throughout the county, the idea is to have something fairly seamless so that all folks who are living here, visiting the county, can enjoy an overall system with a wide variety of choices within that system. The classification system that is represented in that system plan has a range of types within the system. I think the things that, in comparison to the classification system you presently have in the previous plan, we have combined what were originally separated out, regional parks and district parks, and have combined those mainly because of the nature of those parks. But the idea is the emphasis is there. When you think about where your concentrations of population are, a lot of the different types of parks that should comprise your system should also be something that the municipalities participate in providing. So the regional park is part of where the county would really have some emphasis in the future in supporting the municipalities or working with the municipalities for some of the other types. Nature Preserve is also a new one that was introduced. You have wonderful assets throughout the county, a lot of it that are just your environmental resources and things like that that really make Union County unique. And so being able to celebrate that, have an educational component to that, and bring that out as part of the system for passive recreation and all the other benefits, that was brought out as a new piece of your classification system. All those are described in great detail within the plan so that you get a sense of exactly what the characteristics should be of each of those types. Generally the composition within, and some imagery to better convey exactly what those types might be. To realize that vision, we have a series of recommendations in the plan that are very detailed, but what's probably most important for you all to see within the plan is that we've organized them according to policy recommendations, facility recommendations, and programming recommendations. So it's not just the place, but all the things that happen to make each of those places successful. Within that, you'll also see how each of those recommendations relates to the goals that were stated earlier in the process. So when you're trying to get a sense of the kinds of things that Union County should move forward on, you can get a sense of, well, if we move forward with this project, how well does that serve us in terms of meeting our goals? So it's an at-a-glance guide, and hopefully will serve you well in terms of implementation and a to-do list going forward. As you read through the plan, there are 4 major takeaways that I want to make you aware of. That we think were expressed throughout the process by folks who participated throughout. And the first one is promotion and access. This isn't just for the folks within Union County, and as we went through the process, we heard from people that their reasons for not using the parks as much as we would expect them to is a lack of awareness of what's out there, how close they are to them, how to find them, things like that. So being able to promote it to your own system, to your own citizens, is important. But the flip side of that, from an economic development standpoint, you want to promote it to the outside world too. So visitors or employers who are considering Union County for a future location, it's really important for them to understand how this plays into your quality of life picture. So being able to present the details of this system, what's unique about it, what should be enjoyed within the system should be something that is communicated in many different ways to folks within and outside of Union County. So one of the ideas that is expressed in the plan is to create certain experiences within the system so different types of user groups can enjoy the Parks and Recreation system in different ways. The list you're seeing on the lower left is just some examples of the types of experiences that might be communicated in your marketing materials as the system builds out over time. So some of the key recommendations in this related to this takeaway is maintaining an updated inventory. People really need to know what that is, and anytime that they are on your website or looking through other materials, being able to express what's the latest and greatest through those materials is important. I've already mentioned the thematic experiences. People today are getting so much of their information online that being able to have things right at their fingertips with online maps and apps that even get them there is a great way to keep people aware of what's there, and they can use it even on site as they're approaching a park or within the park. Quarterly publications is another way to communicate for folks who are not so used to using the online services. Wayfinding, just that signage system that's recognizable and get people to where they're going when they're looking for it and orient them accordingly. Low-cost introductory programs to get people into the parks and using them, so different types of activities that a wide variety of citizens can utilize is one way to expose people to the system that you have. And then, of course, working with with economic development to be able to promote that system, because to the extent that you can include that information in communicating to people who are considering Union County as a location is really important. Seminole County, Florida has a great example of online maps that you can click on and see very specific information about their parks. So that might be something that you would look to as a model for how to develop that. A second takeaway is developing strong partnerships. So much of what you want to achieve in Union County would be best achieved with strong partnerships with the municipalities within the county, institutions, and even some of your corporations that are located here. Schools can certainly be part of that mix, and the more you can find out where you have commonalities, where you have common goals in mind, that sharing of resources can get you down that path a lot further and a lot more buy-in from all the folks who are operating within the county. So again, some of your key recommendations here are to partner with those municipalities, find out where you've got some priorities in common and try to move forward on some of those with the sharing of resources. Partnering with area schools, you've got a lot of resources already, a lot of facilities that are available, and being able to create the right relationship with the school system so that you can actually have access to those facilities that exist for your citizens when they're not in use for during school hours. Coordinating with other Union County departments. Your staffs, I think, within your departments do a great job of coordinating, but as these plans continue to update and evolve, whether it's your transportation plan, some of the things coming out of your health department, things like that, the more they're aligned, again, you can find those opportunities to really share some of those resources and continue to make this system a very effective system. Partnering with local health organizations, having mobile screenings is something that you can offer in the park. So just the plan has a variety of ideas to help citizens across Union County have access to programs and activities. And then partnering with nonprofits and state agencies and corporations. A lot of them are already operating here, but leveraging that so that it is in line with what this plan recommends, and again, finding something that aligns with their missions. Cabarrus County, one of your neighbors, is having some success with these relationships with schools. So we've included in the plan a sample agreement that perhaps an initial relationship could be formed with a school to be able to move forward on those joint use programs. Other entities can participate in providing a lot of facilities. It doesn't all have to be on the shoulders of the county, but again, to the extent that these are being provided by non-county entities and having arrangements for use with them so that there isn't too much redundancy in the system unnecessarily. Third takeaway is striving for a healthy community. The University of California at Riverside has developed these 7 dimensions of health and wellness, and when you look at the elements of a park and recreation system, so many of them can be found in those elements. And so promoting that, it's not just physical fitness, but also emotional health, spiritual health, and giving people opportunities to learn about food and nutrition, things of that nature. So again, this hinges a great deal on partnerships. I won't go through each of these, but you can see that there are so many entities that are operating within Union County, and being able to program places within the parks so some of these programs can be offered and use that as an avenue, a conduit to give people opportunities to learn about how to improve their health and participate in those related programs. The seniors and the children are 2 segments of the population that you really, as your population changes over the next 10 to 20 years, you may want to focus on those 2 segments. A mobile gardening program like the one in Omaha might be something that can travel around to parks and even beyond your park system to teach children about food and nutrition. And then outdoor fitness. These types of facilities are becoming more popular and easily accessed, especially amongst active seniors. 4th takeaway is resource management. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, you have so many wonderful natural assets here that are worthy of protection, and being able to celebrate those by protecting them with these nature preserves, but also giving people a chance to experience it and then develop educational programs around that will go a long way to raising awareness and appreciation for what you have. So funding positions for the counties, for the Parks and Recreation System to move some of these things forward. Maximize the use of available funding that you have through these resources today. Acquire land now for some of the things that you may anticipate in the future, so that that land is available when these different facilities that are envisioned in the plan can be realized. And then, of course, increase access to the parks and conduct programs to give people more exposure. The plan also includes an action plan, which looks out over the next 10 years and have short, medium, and long-term priorities. And just to give you a little taste of that, in the short term, which would be over the next 12 months, to increase communication and coordination with municipalities and local organizations. Initiate that joint use agreement with the school to serve as a model. Reestablish a grant program that you've had before for athletic associations, but expand that out to grants that municipalities can take advantage of as well. And this plan can help you with pursuing CAPRA certification. Medium term, finding a pilot greenway project. We heard throughout the process there's so much support for wanting more trails, greenways, linkages in the county, all across the county. So having that pilot greenway project to really give people a taste of what that is would be medium term. Completion of Jesse Helms Park, for which you already have a master plan, and as I mentioned, the targeted land acquisition program would take some time, but something to focus on. Long term, you're looking at perhaps a northern regional park to balance the asset that you have in the south with Cane Creek. An expanded trail network throughout the county, building on some that you have today, and then the one that you might do as a pilot project, and then the nature preserves we mentioned before. Funding is, of course, always a question, and so many different avenues for that, but I think our emphasis here is on the partnerships. When you have several entities trying to accomplish a lot of the same things, and being able to join forces and find those ways to implement the plan together is going to be really important. So with that, that is the plan in a nutshell, and we are happy to take any questions. Before I do, I just want to say how much we've enjoyed working with Union County, the staff, the steering committee, and all the people who participated through the process, and it was really been enjoyable for us. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions, Beth, myself, and even staff.
Any further questions? Now, ma'am, you're very clear. Appreciate your time.
Okay, well, thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Move that we adopt the Union County Parks and Recreation Comprehensive Master Plan for 2015 through 2025.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? None. Okay. Next, we have initial discussion of the Union County Board of Education fiscal year 2016 budget request. Ms. Manager?
Thank you, Chairman. As the board is aware, we received the Board of Education's request for budget Friday. I think it was about 3:40 in the afternoon, May 15th. Staff at this point in time has only done a preliminary assessment of what the request is, and we would like to just give you kind of an overview of some of the takeaways that we have had and answer any questions that you may have as part of the process as we go forward. Mr. Yates?
Thank you. Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity again tonight to talk a little bit about the school's budget request. Before we get started, just remind, Cindy mentioned, we received it on Friday afternoon, so we haven't had a lot of time with it to do much analysis, and I think you can anticipate during that week of the 25th, I think on here we have the 28th, but anytime during that week, that we'll present the manager's budget, a recommendation concerning schools in a work session, and then that'll be actually transmitted to you as finishing the budget work by the end of that week. What I want to talk to you tonight about briefly is kind of our initial analysis based on the appellate court ruling and what I would consider kind of your worst case scenario, your exposure in court. Talk about the initial analysis based on the couple of pages out of the school's budget. Talk about the possible impact of future appeals. As mentioned earlier, I think by Mr. Capella, that there are still some avenues related to the 13-14 funding dispute that are still out there. And then talk about the next steps in the school's funding process specifically, and those will look very similar to the ones we saw earlier related to the budget. I think it's kind of it's a challenging discussion to talk about the school's funding at this point. And I think as the Board of Education adopted their budget, I guess it was a couple of weeks ago now, there was a lot of interesting discussion around what the numbers will be. And if you were looking at the school's budget request that was transmitted to you on Friday, it's a little confusing. There's some parts of it that kind of talk about multi-year plans, bond elections, and so forth. But we think, and based on the conversations and based on watching the meeting and the conversations that the Board of Education had and the comments from the superintendent as well as some of their staff during that meeting, that we have to look at the school's budget from almost a worst case scenario. And I think we heard it multiple times during that meeting that if you don't ask or if you don't put it in your budget request, that you can't get to it in court. And that's kind of what the appellate court said, is that if you don't make it part of your budget submission, then it's not admissible in court. So in the original, or in their budget proposal that was transmitted to you, the schools asked for about $497 million of local funding. And I think we have to look at it as if we were going to go back to court in that case, and what would your exposure be? And in this case, you're looking at about 215 cents on the tax rate. Your exposure on the current expense funding would be about $104.5 million. The capital maintenance side, $160 million. And then the capital brick and mortar program of about $232 million. And in their proposed budget, they listed these all out as line items. And in our opinion, and I think what you heard from the Board of Education, that then that puts them in play for discussion for possible proceedings. And I think it's really important to kind of analyze that from a tax bill perspective. If you're looking at the average homeowner in Union County, and there's no average homeowner in Union County, but if right around the median of home value, about $200,000, and a motor vehicle of about $9,500, you're looking at a tax bill for schools of just over $4,500. And that's up from the 2015 amount of $993. So that's a fairly significant increase. And while this is obviously not the kind of what the simplest interpretation, I'll talk about that in just a moment, but this is kind of your worst case scenario that you're looking at. That'd make your total tax rate about 247 cents, and I'm sorry, that dollar sign shouldn't be there. It's about 247.72 cents, which puts you far and above away from everybody else in the state as far as tax rate goes. The capital request, when we talk about the $160 million and the $232 million, it kind of breaks down as repair and replacement of about $110 million, technology and transportation of about $8 million, scope and market adjustments of about 4.8 million, roofing assessment and reconstruction of about 21 million, and ongoing preventive maintenance of about 16. That's how you get to the 160. And then their major projects are their brick and mortar projects, which are part of their CCEP program, of right around $233 million. And that total capital program then comes to about $393 million across the board. Now, if you dig a little deeper into their proposal and you read all the notes and you try to triangulate some of the discussion that they had at their meeting and talking about not asking for everything all at once and so forth, this is kind of what we would call the friendlier or the most gentle interpretation of the information that they sent us. Keeping in mind that both of these numbers are embedded into their proposed budget, which means you can go really either way with this. So looking at current expense funding doesn't change of about 104.5 million. The capital maintenance, assuming that then it's an 8-year program and they split that into year 1, they requested about 19.8 million. And then the brick and mortar projects, if you did that as GO debt, that annual payment would be just under $16 million. So let's kind of look at that same homeowner that we talked about in this assessment who was going to end up paying that $4,500 bill for school tax. That same homeowner under this scenario, which I believe is probably the friendliest interpretation of the budget, is looking at about a 60.76 cent tax rate and a tax bill of just under $1,300. And that would then fund a $33.4 million increase in the school's funding for capital projects as well as for current expense. And that breaks out, we're looking at about 20, both scenarios, about a 20% increase in current expense funding. That's about 17.4 million. Under this version, you're looking at that about a 1.3% increase in the capital funding plus the new debt service that would be associated with any bonds, which totals about $33.4 million, or a 31.3% increase over
Jeff,
its 2015 amount.
Can I interrupt you for 1 second?
Absolutely.
Looking at the tax rate, we're talking about just the school bifurcated tax rate. We've got the regular county on top of that, so these numbers, this 60.7 cent would not be the total tax rate.
That'd be
In
correct.
fact, it would be,
92.69.
okay.
And I apologize, I left off my little block at the bottom, which is always informational in our presentations. The total countywide tax rate, assuming you give tentative approval to the budget tonight, would then be 92.7 cents, give or take a couple of cents.
And that would make that $1,273 greater?
It would, because that would just be the tax bill for the school side of the equation.
Sorry to interrupt.
Sorry, what's our total debt right now?
The total debt is about 400 million.
How much of that is the school debt?
Right around 95, $96 million of it. Or, I'm sorry, 96%. So
370 million, $380 million?
the vast majority, I don't have the number off the top of my head, but yeah.
Well, if the numbers that are calculated here is 390 million, 360 million
For
capital?
under the worst case scenario, you're kind of looking at 392.7 million. Under the friendlier interpretation of it, you're talking right around 157 of which would be bond funded.
So the total debt service to the county at that point would be almost 60 million a year? I read that
Right.
correctly?
Your debt service is about 44.5 million right now, and coming up in 15-16 for schools. And under this scenario, you'd add another 15.8 to that, so it would be just over $60 million. Quick look at the current expense funding history against kind of where it's been. If you were to take 2009 through 2016's current expense only request, because as you can saw in both of those analysis, current expense remained the same, and there's not really any conjecture about the request in current expense. Capital, that's a little fuzzier. They've asked for multiple numbers in capital, but on current expense it was the same. Either way you cut it, you're looking at about 35% increase from 2009 to 2016. and almost a 20% increase going from 15 to 16. And it's interesting during the same time period, if you use first month ADM as kind of your indicator, and there's a lot of ADM numbers out there, all of them indicate different things. But if you use that first month ADM indicator across that same time period, you're looking at about just under 11% growth, or about 1.4%, almost 1.5% annually. So during that same time period, you're looking at costs growing 35.1% and their student population growing about 11%. So you're certainly seeing growth in their current expense funding that's considerably outpacing by about 24%, almost a quarter, what their growth is in their ADM. So it appears, based on this analysis, if you were to fund, or if you were to go with the 16, that the efficiency per student seems to be going down to some degree.
An ADM for the public's information,
Average daily membership,
or student population.
our student population, right. The count of number of students in the schools. Commissioner?
Under that worst-case scenario, what was it, $2 and, so instead of 76 cents like we currently have, it would be $2.47.
Right.
And there's a limit. The state has a limit on us, right?
Actually, when it comes to schools funding is excluded from the $1.50 cap. And because of the way we break it out, there's no statutory limitation on funding of schools.
So under their request, we actually could have to pay a $2.47 tax rate plus the 30 if we wanted to keep schools. I mean, if we wanted to keep our sheriff's deputies and EMS and libraries. And
247 is inclusive of the county fund. So you're looking at 215.79, almost 216 pennies just for schools alone. And that's up from the 45.5 that they had last year. So it's a 170-cent differential from the prior year. Where they presented, and this is right out of their budget proposal, so we at this point haven't done much analysis on this. This is where their cost growth were, and I won't go through every line, but I think the biggest chunk, if you look for teacher supplements, a request of about $11.3 million, principal supplements and assistant principal supplements of just over $1 million, and then some other salary adjustments for UCPS employees, and the other big item, funding for charter schools, as well as utility cost and loss of driver's ed funding from the state. And I want to talk a little bit about the charter schools piece, because I think the way that the schools lay this out is a kind of a misnomer for the public. The schools are required to provide the charter schools local funding on a per student basis equal to what that student costs to educate within our system. You would assume, because everything else is done on a per pupil basis, then students out of the system would generate efficiency and savings. And the way that they structure their budget, it appears though that they don't take into account that efficiency from having the loss of students, but that they add on to the top end of that the cost of those students in the program, and the cost that they would have to pay in addition versus having actual savings from those students. Yes, sir.
Years ago, we couldn't contribute to charter schools, or is it now the law that you can contribute through the public schools just as a pass-along expense?
It is a pass-through to the charter schools. Conceptually, or the theory is that for every student that they take out of the school system is also experiencing a reduction in those costs, and those costs then are borne by the charter school, and the charter school is educating that student and should get that funding. So it was about $3.5 million in 2015 that they received from the county that they would have transmitted over to the charter schools for students that have gone from the school system, are no longer in the UCPS school system, but are at the charter schools. Based on this scenario, because their request is going up to $105 million of current expense funding, they would have to also fund a portion to the charter schools. But the way they show it here, instead of taking that as efficiency and saying we're not educating 1,200, 1,300 students in our school system, so we're seeing a decrease in cost, they're putting that cost on top of as an expense that they actually transfer out. And I think that's kind of what you see here, is that display. And we've had some discussions about that with them, and they continue to display it this way. So I think that that's how they kind of interpret or are kind of placing that out there.
So let me make sure I understand what you just said. there are fewer students going to Union County Public Schools, more students going to charter schools, and this is just a hypothetical. I'm not saying that there are. There's fewer students going to Union County Public Schools, more students going to the charter schools. So because of that, we need to give the schools more money. We need to give them an additional $1.1 million for the children that are no longer being educated by Union County, but instead are being educated by a charter school.
It appears from the way that they lay their budget out, and I haven't got the clearest answer on this every time we ask, but it appears from the way they lay it out that the educational efficiency or the cost per student would go up as you move those students out of the program. And you're right. So fewer students attending the schools, but we're still paying increased cost to the schools. They're not seeing the efficiency of losing those students in their school system. And there is some argument to say that there's not a marginal gain from every student leaving, but when you're talking about 1,000 or 1,300 students, that's a pretty significant chunk that are not showing up at your classroom every day of the school year. So that's what it appears from the way this is laid out and the way that their budget request is laid out.
Am I not correct that the taxpayers are, whether it's state, federal, or local money, the taxpayers are paying to support those students and provide an education, whether it be at the charter school or Union County Public School? So the funds come in and they're passed through and they go to the charter school. Now you're telling me that the taxpayer also has to give Union County Public Schools the money for the charter school to educate the student?
That's the way it's been for some time, is my understanding. At least in the 3 years I've been here, is that there's always some portion of the county, of the current expense funding on a per student basis that gets allocated to the charter school for the students that attend that charter school.
Their ADM numbers, does that include charter school students, projected students?
I do not believe so.
So if you have, I mean, I would think this would be I mean, it's kind of like vouchers almost. If a kid goes to a private school, we don't have to pay them for that child. Of course, that child doesn't get state and federal money, but are we fronting the whole cost? Like, okay, if it's $7,000 per child, they're getting some from the federal, some from the state, and some from local. So we're paying the state and federal portion as well as the local portion?
Only the local portion is set up this way. The state funding goes directly to the charter school, and I'm not familiar with how the.
What would prevent us from doing it for a private school, giving the kid that portion of the funds to go to private school? So if the county portion is X amount of dollars, we give that to some kid to go to private school.
I think you run into some general statute issues related to.
Yeah, that's because I thought that's the way it was set up, that we couldn't give money to charter schools for.
We cannot give money directly to the charter schools. It's a pass through.
Pass it through the.
We pass it through the school system, and the way that it's always listed as a separate expense versus a reduction in ADM or a reduction in other areas, it leads us to believe that as you add the funding to your budget or to their budget, that they are asking for those increases as well to fund those charter schools. So. And I think that's an entirely appropriate question when they come over.
Can you say that again? You lost me there.
Okay. What I'm just saying is the way that it's listed out and shown on their budget is that they're also asking you to fund, in addition to their cost, the cost growth projected for those students at the charter school. So they're not all I'm saying is they're not taking the efficiency out of the bottom line. They're adding on for those payments to the charter school.
Okay, so they're not going to take this additional $1.1 million and pass it to the charter school.
That's what this is laid out, yes.
They are going to.
That would be.
But what they're passing back to the charter school is less per student than the county is allocating in local funds, correct?
It should be exactly the same.
Should be, is it?
Should be.
May I weigh in? And I'm just going to be more direct than Mr. Yates. Is the way that we interpret this funding request is that when they lose a student, the amount of money associated with that student that we have paid goes with the student. So if the student goes to the charter school, so does that money go to the charter school. The way, and I think what Mr. Yates is saying is that what they are asking us for is, we've lost X sum of dollars to charter schools because we have to pass through, so kind of make up the deficit. So I'm not sure that this is not the taxpayer paying twice for a single
That's my point.
student.
Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yes, and I'm sorry.
Okay.
Well, then that leads to another question. In the ADM numbers, does that include the early college students?
My understanding is ADM would include the early college students.
Do they include anything in their budget that shows money moving to SPCC?
No, my understanding is SPCC only receives headcount funding from the state for the teachers at the early college, that not any direct funding from the school system.
In our discussions with Dr. Sador, they receive no monies from UCPS for those early college students. Only for FTEs from the state is the only source for those. Even though those children are on the SPCC campus the entire day, they do not go to a Union County school.
So Union County is getting the benefit of the students, but we're supplementing SPCC for all the educational costs.
You got it. And I asked a while back, what is that dollar amount that should be going to SBCC for that early college? Because I think it's 400 and some students, right?
I think it's
Right around
300.
300 and change.
I think they have a capacity of 6, I believe, but I think right now they have 300 plus students, so we'd have to go back and look at what our ADM is.
What's the local amount per student?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What do we fund per student right now?
I want to say it's in the $2,200, $2,300 range.
So it's over $500,000.
I'd have to go check. I'd have to go double check that and make sure, but it's somewhere in that neighborhood.
So if, let's just say it's $2,200 and you've got 350 students at SBCC, then if what I'm understanding you to say is for that 350 students, give or take, there should be $2,200 or $2,300 per student going to SBCC for educating that child, which the taxpayers are subsidizing to SBCC, even though that money is going to Union County Public School.
Yes, in theory. If it were a charter school, then yes, they would be getting that funding. But under this scenario, the school, SBCC gets a head count from the state, but there's not local dollars from the school system being transferred over. So the schools are still getting the funding for that ADM seat, or that.
Now, is that the case across the state, or is that
I think that's the nuance of how it works.
in
with
Union
the
County?
I think that's how it works for community colleges. I'm not positive. We can
Okay, so
absolutely
you
find out.
believe that to be the case across the state in the community college?
I'd have to check. I don't know.
I'd be
off the top
curious
of
to
my
know that answer.
head. So the capital request, as we kind of presented in the, what we consider to be the more friendly analysis of that, is about 19.8 million for regular capital needs, and that's ongoing replacement and renewal. And that is part of their 8-year program. Based on the notes, that's about 160 total. And then a brick and mortar for a 2016 bond election, that's about $157.7 million for a possible 2016 bond election. And I just want to quickly show you real quick as we kind of wrap up. As mentioned earlier, the appellate court denied to rehear the school's case. So if they continue on and any other appeals and the jury verdict is returned, you're looking at about an impact of 33 cents total. This is in addition to anything from the 15-16 discussion and process. So you're looking at a tax bill, a one-time tax bill for, under that same scenario, $200,000, $9,500 car. You're looking at a scenario of about $693 one-time tax bill to cover any additional verdicts that come out of the appellate court. Or not the appellate court, they come out of any additional appeals, were the schools to be successful in those appeals.
But that's only based on a $200,000 home. So for every $100,000 in value, their tax bill would be approximately $350.
Right, again, these work off the mean. So the higher you go above 200, if you're in the $600,000 range, you can assume roughly three times that. The car is very little. So And again, going down from 200, it obviously changes as well. So where we're at the week of May 25th, I think you're going to talk in just a couple of minutes about a possible joint meeting with the school board, which I think, given the discussion you had on charter schools, is very important from the perspective of being able to fully understand some of those issues and kind of how that funding works. May 29th, the manager is going to provide to you the addendum to the county manager's proposed budget, which will include her recommendation related to funding the schools. June 1st, you'll have the public hearing on the schools budget. June 15th, your required public hearing, which you saw this earlier, and then June 30, adoption of the Board of County Commissioners approved budget for 2016. Oh, going the wrong way, sorry. So with that, we have our budget website. All this information will be available on the website. If you have a question, you can email ask the manager or public comments. We have emails for those. So with that, I'll turn it back to you, Commissioner, if you have any questions.
So what I heard you say, worst case, we're looking at a $500 million request for this year.
Right. Even if you were to take the request for local current expense, our local expense, our local funding is about $500 million.
$500 million. Okay. Thank you, sir. Any questions? Okay. Thank you, Jeff. All righty. Next, we'll move on to 8A, and that was the motion to hear from our county attorney's comments. Mr. Bundy?
Commissioners, I'm disheartened by the fact that I'm going to stand before you tonight with the anticipation of additional legal battles between Union County Board of Education and Union County. As a lawyer, I have been trained to hope for the best but to prepare for the worst. And tonight, I am recommending that you prepare for the worst. I've had conversations with each of you and with the county staff, and I know that the county does not want another trial over the budget for the fiscal year 2013-14, which we went through, or another legal fight over this year's school budget. But based on strategy used in the past by the school board, I must make a recommendation to you tonight that you allocate money to expand the county's legal resources. 2 years ago, the school board sued the Union County Board of Commissioners over the school board's budget for the fiscal year 2013-2014. As county attorney, I represented the Board of Commissioners in that lawsuit, and the Raleigh law firm of Schwartz and Shaw represented the school board. The case took 9 weeks to try and resulted in a $91 million judgment being entered against the county. Throughout the entire trial, the county contended that the lawsuit was limited to the school board's budget request, but the judge allowed the school board to ask the jury to award money that the school board had never asked the Board of Commissioners to appropriate. The county appealed, and the Court of Appeals deliberated for about 5 months, and then issued a ruling that agreed with the county's position, reversed the judgment, and remanded the case for trial. Rather than accepting the Court of Appeals ruling, the school board petitioned the Court of Appeals last Tuesday and requested that it reconsider its decision. The court denied the school board's request by an order entered last Friday. I have every reason to believe that the school board will now continue the fight and petition the North Carolina Supreme Court to review the decision of the Court of Appeals. Once the appellate process has been completed, the county and the school board will be back in trial again over the remaining issues in the case if the matter is not settled. Now, the school board has presented you with a budget request for this fiscal year asking for $497 million in local funds. This budget request includes an increase in local money of $390.5 million over and above the school board's budget for the fiscal year 2014-2015. Members of the school board have stated that they have learned from the Court of Appeals that if they don't ask for money in their budget, they can't get it in court. The school board is still represented by the same law firm that aggressively sued the Union County Board of Commissioners 2 years ago for more money than it had asked the commissioners to appropriate during that year. I have reason to believe that in that budget dispute 2 years ago, the Board of Education's lawyers had been preparing their case for weeks before the Board of Education passed its resolution to challenge the budget. I found out about the budget dispute when the Board of Education passed the resolution and began preparations to defend the county at that time. We were behind from the beginning and never really caught up. I must recommend that the Board of Commissioners immediately authorize me to expand our legal team and associate another law firm to work with me in defending the county and its taxpayers in these matters. I make this recommendation for several reasons. First of all, there are two potential lawsuits to prepare for: a lawsuit over the budget for the 2013-2014 fiscal year and a lawsuit over the budget for the current year. These are two separate and distinct legal matters involving millions of dollars, and they cannot be resolved in one trial. Another reason for making this recommendation is due to the expedited nature of any potential lawsuit over this year's budget. By law, the Board of Commissioners must adopt its budget no later than June the 30th. If the school board challenges the amount that the county appropriates for the schools, then the two boards are required by law to meet in a joint meeting and begin the mediation process within 7 days of the date that the county adopts its budget. If mediation efforts fail, the school board has the right to sue the county within 5 days, and the case immediately goes to the top of the court docket for trial at the next term of Superior Court here in Union County. We lawyers call this the rocket docket. There is no delay allowed for trial preparation. Usually in a complex lawsuit over tens of millions of dollars, it is not unusual for the parties to prepare for trial for a year or two, developing evidence, obtaining documents from each other, interviewing expert witnesses, and so forth. However, when the school board sued the county over the 2013-2014 budget, the trial began 12 days after mediation ended. In 2006, Mr. Schwartz represented the Beaufort County School Board and sued the Beaufort County Board of Commissioners, and the case went to trial 3 days after the mediation ended. 3 days. The county needs to be prepared for trial when it adopts the budget next month. We simply cannot wait for the school board to begin the mediation process or to file a lawsuit before we begin to prepare for trial. There's not enough time, and it is unlikely that we could expand your legal team and hire another law firm to assist on such short notice. I have reached out to a law firm in Charlotte to see if they are available to help me in representing the county in this matter, and I recommend that the county immediately engage the firm of Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice. This firm is well known for its representation of Mecklenburg County, the city of Charlotte, and other units of local government in high-profile and important business disputes.
Excuse me, could you rename that law firm?
Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice. The attorneys that would primarily work with me in this matter are Jim Cooney and Mike Barnhill. They are both very accomplished trial lawyers. You may recognize Mr. Cooney's name. He represented one of the Duke lacrosse players and helped expose the fraudulent nature of the charges that were brought against his client and the rest of the Duke lacrosse team. I know that it will not be a popular decision for this board to make, to hire more lawyers and spend more public money on legal fees. However, the law is clear that this board is to scrutinize the school board's budget request and to provide only the funds that may be needed for the economical administration of the school system. I submit that it is also this board's duty to defend its budgetary decisions in court if necessary. 2 years ago, the taxpayers were faced with a huge judgment after the trial with the school board. This board did the right thing and expanded the legal team with attorneys who specialize in appellate work to assist me in appealing the judgment to the North Carolina Court of Appeals. It was expensive. The county spent over $160,000 for these appellate attorneys' work, but the county won the appeal, and this has saved the taxpayers approximately $73 million. Sometimes you have to spend money in order to save money. I think most people would agree that spending $160,000 in order to save $73 million is a good return on the investment. Unless this board is prepared to appropriate most or all of the school board's budget requests for this fiscal year, the county needs to be preparing for mediation and trial immediately. I therefore recommend that you expand your legal team and authorize that the firm of Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice be retained immediately to assist us in representing the county concerning all proceedings that arise out of this year's Board of Education budget request, as well as any retrial of the 2013-2014 budget dispute that may be necessary. Are there any questions from the board?
I do have one question.
Yes, sir.
We discussed, I think, in our last meeting, House Bill 740. I believe it was House Bill 740. But anyway, I listened to some of the floor arguments that Representative Craig Horn made against that particular bill. And one of the comments that he made, and I need clarification, was that at the end of every day during the trial, that there was an offer to settle the case over the 13-14 budget. Can you clarify, did that actually occur?
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
No, okay.
No.
You can expand if you'd like. I just needed to hear that no.
No. There have been no settlement discussions to resolve this matter, no communications whatsoever with the attorney for the Board of Education since, as I recall, February of 2014.
Now describe a settlement offer,
well,
in your opinion.
There was a communication made from the Board of Education's attorney that they would be willing to work out payment terms.
Payment terms on?
The entire judgment amount.
Okay.
The entire judgment amount. And I indicated to him that as long as the Board of Education was not willing to discuss compromise of the amount, that there was nothing further to discuss, but if they changed their position on that, to let me know. And I've not heard from him since I wrote that letter in February of 2014, as I recall.
So just so I'm clear, and I want to make sure that our records reflect this, Representative Horn, when you stood on the House floor and told all of your colleagues that there was an offer to settle the 13-14 dispute every day at trial, I want the record to reflect that that is absolutely incorrect. Am I fair in saying that?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board?
I can tell you from, I think we've had this conversation, my stint living in the Midwest, when there's tornadic clouds, you better prepare. And this is a tornadic cloud, and it would be irresponsible for us not to prepare. Commissioner Rushing.
When this $91 million is the reason that I ran. I made a comment at the time that I had been gone for 8 years, and I knew that if that money was there, that you guys were geniuses because y'all had turned the county completely around, and y'all should be elected for life.
No way in hell.
I came into this, and one of the first statements that I made was that the Board of Education, they're adults just like the Board of County Commissioners, and capable of making decisions right and wrong, and they should have authority probably over their even taxing authority to be able to get their to get their funding what they needed, and let the voters decide if they were doing the right thing. But I have reached out. Chairman Helms has reached out, as liaisons, Lance and I both have reached out. And I'm afraid. I'm afraid for what this could do to our county, to our children. This is not sustainable in any way, shape, or form. You can't put a $2.50 tax rate on the citizens of Union County. There's just no way you can do it. It's impossible. I've made comments to the manager when we first started hearing rumors that this was going to happen. I said I would make the motion to fire you if you did this. And I don't know why. I mean, I've heard that the BOE, they're the ones that pushed this. It wasn't the staff over there, but it's horrible. It's a bad situation that we're in. I don't want to go to court. I don't think anybody wants to go to court, but I teach people every day to be prepared for what's coming, especially if it's bad. And so, in light of what your comments are, Ligon, I move that we authorize the county manager to contract with, make sure I get these names right, Womble, Carlisle, Sandridge, and Rice for 2 different engagements. One would be the dispute with the 2013-2014 budget, and then, of course, if there's a dispute with a potential budget for the 2015-2016 budget. I would say that each engagement in an amount not to exceed the county manager's budgeting authority, and further, that we authorize use of contingency to pay for such engagements.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Let me clarify one thing. I want to be clear on the contention that there were settlement offers made. Every day, Brian Shaw, who was one of the attorneys that represented the Board of Education, at the end of the day, came over to me and said, do you want something to the effect of, would you like to talk about settlement today? In some days, we talked a little bit about it's too bad the lawsuit can't be resolved or something of that nature. I think what's been represented is that every day the Board of Education extended a settlement offer. That did not happen. Every day Brian Shaw and I discussed, isn't it too bad that we can't resolve this, something of that nature.
Or statements were made, we can always make this go away.
Right.
And they're defining that as a settlement offer.
But there was never any discussion on a dollar amount to settle.
It was not.
the lawsuit.
It was not. We can settle this if the county will appropriate X number of dollars on some schedule. That didn't happen.
We never received anything electronically in writing indicating that they would settle for anything less than the full judgment, correct? And that would be only in payment plans.
Well, now, it all depends upon timing. After the verdict was rendered, there were a few letters back and forth between me and Mr. Schwartz. And I think that there was even an offer from the then chairman to the chairman of the Board of Education to resolve the matter. The last communication that I ever received from the Board of Education's attorney is we will not compromise the amount of the judgment, but we will talk to you about payment terms on an aggressive schedule, I think was the word that he used, an aggressive schedule. And as I recall, that letter to me was, and I'm speaking from memory, I think it was in late 2013, and I responded in like February of 2014. It was about the same time that the county was about to appropriate $9.5 million for emergency roof repairs. And I wrote Mr. Schwartz a letter at that time, and I said, as long as the Board of Education is not interested in compromising the amount of the judgment, then the county's not going to make an offer. But if the Board of Education will consider compromising the amount of the judgment, let me know and we can discuss the matter further. And I've never heard anything further from him since, and that was well over a year ago.
Did Representative Horn ever contact you to ask you specifically that question?
I've never spoken with Representative Horn that I can recall.
As the manager,
No, sir.
as the finance director,
No, sir.
assistant county manager? No, sir. Anybody sitting on this dais? Were any of you contacted? I sure wasn't. Thank you, Mr. Bundy.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you. One more thing, you know, we've heard from the Waxhaw ladies for the one in the library. We've had people come up meeting after meeting. We've had firefighters come up begging for funding. We've had, you know, through this budget process, it's been interesting. We used to do it different, but it's interesting how we've done it. You know, just a piece of this, a little tiny piece of the money that they're asking for would fund these things. And it's hard to sit here and you know, with children in the school system and wanting to help the children in the school system. I have a great desire to do that. I have a huge desire to do that. But there's so many needs in this county, and we cannot just keep going to court with a big stick over our head of half a billion dollars.
With a B.
With a B, not a M, a B, $500 million. And how do I even try to make plans, guys, to help the libraries in Waxhaw? How do I even look at Parks and Rec and say we can do anything if every year we have a big stick over our head with the $500 million? Is it going to be $1 billion next year, or what's it going to be? We have to meet with the school board. We have to work to figure out what is going on. And I hope that they will be open to that as we have been.
All righty. Next is item 8B. And I think our discussions this evening have demonstrated the need for this because there's a lot of question. I know that I have made personal requests for these meetings, as well as some of the Board of Education members have made those requests as well. I'd like to make a motion that we extend a formal invitation to the Board of Education to meet with us in joint session during the week of May 25th so the Board of Education can present their budget requests for 2015-16. Any discussion?
I agree. I think it's important, given the scope of the budget request and a lot of the questions that we've had. It's unfortunate that the appeal was made, but I think we still need to continue to work forward with the Board of Education. And it is my intent to try and work with them, and I really hope that they will sit down with us and at least through one full meeting and possibly a second if needed, that it's not just a presentation, but that we have an open dialogue, question and answer, so we can both sides understand exactly where we're coming from. I think that's what the citizens and residents and taxpayers of Union County expect, and I think that's what they deserve.
All right. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? None. Okay. Item 8C is tentative approval of county portion of the 2015-2016 budget, as we discussed in our work session. Any discussion?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of folks I'd like to give more money to, but I think we all see why that's not possible.
Okay.
I believe Manager Koto said 8 work sessions.
Believe so.
I know that the, Finance Department and Manager's Office, all of the staff have been exhaustive in your work on the budget this year. The zero-based efforts to keep Union County lean and mean and to work. I know one of the things that I have always promoted is the sustainable effort, the sustainability of our government. You have done that. You have projected into the future that we can provide Union County services at a standard tax rate, and so I applaud you for that. I appreciate your hard work.
Okay. All in favor of tentative approval of the budget, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay. All right. Next, we have County Manager's Conference.
I have no comments this evening, thank you.
All right. Commissioner Rushing?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, you know, I'm kind of still at a loss for being able to say much with the billion-dollar word being flown around. I just hope that we can, I honestly hope that this meeting with the school board will be taken, and this invitation will be taken as what it is. This has to be fixed. This cannot be the way that we do business. This is not the way it's designed to be. It's not the way that the state intends it to be. And if we can't figure this out locally, we do need help from the state. We cannot continue this. You know, like I say, I love the people at the school system. I grew up in the Union County Public Schools. I have 2 kids in the Union County Public Schools, but you know, you can't do business like that. I would not do business with anybody that did business like this in my personal life. And I hope that this ends. I hope this ends. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Lance Simpson?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to sitting down with both boards. I think it's important. I really want to thank everyone that's gone through this budget process, even though it's tentatively agreed to at this point. We have heard from numerous people, and there's been a lot of work. One of the challenges that we gave Mr. Yates and his staff was to try and overcome this revaluation, and because we did not want to do anything that would negatively affect the county. And they have worked hard to try and minimize the effect on the county. And I beat him up several times over it with numbers and numbers, and he's come back every time. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate everyone that has fought for what they believe in and what they ask for. And I hope in the future we can do more. Right now, I think that we have a very workable budget, and I'm looking forward to working with the schools to come up with the other part of it. Have a good night.
Commissioner Akins?
Yes, thank you. First off, I just want to say thank you to the 2 deputies that were here. Appreciate Chairman Helms, you recognizing them, and appreciate their service to our community, to our citizens. I also want to mention that I appreciate the gentleladies from Waxhaw who came and spoke on behalf of their libraries. And certainly, you know, if the budget allowed, we would look to expand that. To Safer Community Ministries, Rick Parker, and the young man, Mr. Keziah, that shared very openly his story. I applaud you. I applaud you for standing up for what your program does. I think it's evidenced in Mr. Keziah's comments that truly you're making an impact. And regardless of whatever budget constraints are put on you, I think when you look at the difference that you made in that young man's life, I think you have much to be proud of, and certainly appreciate what Safer Community Ministry has brought to Union County. Finally, I want to be very clear. I think I unfairly demonized Representative Craig Horn as the only local delegate that voted against House Bill 740. I want to clarify that Representative Dean Arp also voted against that bill. So I would ask that the clerk mail a copy of the school budget to Representative Arp and Representative Horn. You don't need to include any letter, but my comment will speak to the fact that this is exactly why House Bill 740 should have been passed. And I hope I have that number right. If I'm not, then you know exactly what bill I'm speaking of. Thank you to the county staff, Mr. Yates, Mr. Cotto, for the exceptional job that you've done in preparation of a sustainable budget. We appreciate the work that you have has gone into this, and look forward to now focusing our attentions, unfortunately, on something that it appears is going to be another battle. But I feel very confident that with Mr. Bundy's recommendation and the addition of some additional legal assistance, and with the very capable staff that we have here in Union County, that we have the best interest of the taxpayers at hand and at heart. And I know that you all, and certainly we will support the effort to protect the taxpayers of Union County. So with that, I wish everyone a good evening.
Commissioner Simpson.
Leaves me on the end, right? Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just ditto a couple of Commissioner Aikman's comments. I want to thank folks at Safer Communities for those comments and for your efforts. Certainly time well spent, and I want to congratulate again Deputies Filliman and Harms. I know I clipped little Miles into his car seat today, and there's nothing more precious than your grandkids when you're putting them in a car seat. So all that work that he's done with child safety is laudable, and particularly as we've watched some of the events over the last several months across the country, I think our school resource officers are extremely important because they serve as a role model and build relationships with kids in each and every school that teach or share with those kids the importance of who those people are and the work that they do and the caring attitude that they have for those students. So I congratulate Ms. Harms on that. The only other comment I'd like to make is I want to clarify my vote. Commissioner Simpson, I thought you were going to have a little discussion on that vote with regard to the attorneys, and saying Commissioner Helms had already asked for the vote, and I didn't get a chance. I certainly support the motion to move forward with Mr. Bundy's request. For me, it's an extremely sad day to have to do that. I think we're better than that, but forewarned is often forearmed. So I want to make that clear for the clerk's benefit. But thank you for your efforts, and I appreciate the opportunity.
I'd like to, one, thank all of our deputies. We recognized 2 this evening, but our deputies across this county all are exemplary, and we're very fortunate to have them serving us. Rick, please tell Mr. Kazai how much we appreciate him coming and sharing his story. That took a lot of fortitude, and he should be very proud of himself. Then also I'd like to thank the manager and her staff for the exceptional work they did in preparing a budget and trying to hold the line so that we do not have to pass on more unnecessary taxes to the taxpayers of Union County. With that, I wish all a pleasant evening, and thank you very much. Motion to adjourn, please.
Aye.
Thank you.